Picture this. You're in the South China Sea. It's quiet. Maybe too quiet.
Right.
Then suddenly, alarms are screaming aboard the USS Ronald Reagan. Radar screens just explode with contacts.
Yeah.
A carrier strike group, this huge symbol of American power, has maybe minutes, possibly just seconds, to figure out what's happening and react.
It's the nightmare scenario, really.
And that's the central question for our deep dive today.
Yeah.
What would actually happen if China attacked a U.S. aircraft carrier?
It is hypothetical, thankfully. But look, the tensions are undeniable. The South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, these are flashpoints.
Yeah.
And many analysts, they warn that just one wrong move, one miscalculation could spark something really big.
And you can't ignore China's naval buildup. I mean, the last 20 years, it's been dramatic. World's largest navy now, by ship count anyway.
Right, the numbers are staggering. But it's not just the quantity, is it? It's the quality. The advanced ships, the weapons, systems specifically designed, some argue, to counter U.S. naval power.
Exactly. So that's our mission today, right? To walk through, step by step, what a Chinese strike might look like. From launch to impact, maybe retaliation, and what it all means.
Absolutely. We need to understand the chain of events, the capabilities on both sides, and, frankly, the potential global fallout. For everyone listening, this isn't just abstract strategy. It's about real-world risk in a vital region.
Okay, let's jump in. If China were to launch a first strike, what's in their toolbox? What are we talking about?
Well, several key systems come up again and again. The YJ-21, for instance. That's the hypersonic carrier killer.
Hypersonic, that sounds fast.
Oh, it is. Think Mach 10. So 10 times the speed of sound, roughly. It can be launched from ships, maybe bombers too.
Yeah.
And that speed, well, it makes it incredibly difficult to intercept. It's designed to just punch through defenses.
Okay, Mach 10. And besides hypersonics, I know there's talk about ballistic missiles too.
Yes, the DF-21D and the longer-range DF-26. These are also dubbed carrier killers. They're ballistic, meaning they go way up, almost into space, before coming down very fast on the target.
And they have long range.
Exceeding 1,500 miles for the DF-26. So they can threaten a carrier from, a long way away from mainland China itself.
Yeah.
That high trajectory and re-entry speed pose a really unique challenge for defense systems.
So threats from land, threats from ships. What about from the air?
China's H-6 bombers are a factor. They can carry air-launched missiles, possibly even air-launched ballistic missiles like the KD-21, though details are a bit murky.
Air-launched ballistic missiles.
Yeah, the idea is standoff. The bomber doesn't have to get close to the carrier group's immediate air defenses. It can launch from hundreds of miles away.
Okay, so missiles coming from land, sea, air. What about underneath the water?
Yeah.
Submarines.
Definitely. China's submarine fleet is getting much quieter, much more capable. They carry torpedoes, naturally, but also anti-ship cruise missiles. A stealthy sub getting into firing position is a major, major concern.
It sounds like they could try to hit a carrier with many things all at once, this idea of swarm tactics.
Exactly, that's the worry. A coordinated attack, maybe hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, perhaps even drones, all arriving around the same time. The goal is saturation. Just overwhelm the defenses, give them too many things to shoot down at once.
And could they try to soften things up before the missiles fly? Cyber attacks.
That's a very real possibility. A cyber attack hitting the carrier group's radar or communications, basically trying to blind them, even temporarily, that could create a critical window of vulnerability just before the physical attack begins. And the tricky part with cyber, of course, is attribution. Was it state-sponsored? Was it a probe? It adds another layer of complexity.
Okay, that's a formidable array of threats. But a U.S. carrier isn't exactly sailing alone and defenseless, is it? Tell us about the protection.
Not at all. A U.S. carrier is the heart of a carrier strike group, or CSG. It's a whole ecosystem of defense. You've got the carrier itself, a guided missile cruiser, several destroyers, usually a fast attack submarine, plus all the aircraft the carrier brings.
A floating fortress, essentially.
Pretty much. A 360-degree shield. We're talking about giants like the USS Gerald R. Ford, the USS Ronald Reagan. These are massive platforms.
And the planes they carry.
You've got F-A-18 Super Hornets, the workhorses for patrols, intercepts, strikes, and increasingly the F-35C Lightning II, the stealth fighter. They provide that outer layer, scouting, engaging threats far out.
But the real magic seems to be the systems on the ships. Aegis. We hear that name all the time. What does it actually do?
Aegis is the key. It's the combat system, the integrated network of radar, computers, and weapons. Think of it as the eyes and the brain of the fleet's air and missile defense.
Okay.
It can track potentially hundreds of targets simultaneously. It assesses threats, prioritizes them, and then directs the right weapon to engage them, all in fractions of a second. It's incredibly sophisticated.
And what weapons does Aegis control? What actually shoots down the incoming missiles?
It's a layered defense. You have missiles like the SM-2, a solid, reliable air defense missile. Then the SM-6, which is more advanced, it can hit cruise missiles, aircraft, even some types of ballistic missiles in their terminal phase. It's very versatile.
So longer range intercepts first. What about things that get closer?
For closer threats, there's the ESSM, the Evolved Sea Sparrow missile. It's quicker, more agile, designed specifically for fast anti-ship missiles.
And if somehow a missile gets through all of that, the absolute last ditch.
That's the Phalanx CIWS close-in weapon system, nicknamed Sea-Whiz.
Right.
It's basically a Gatling gun on steroids, fires thousands of rounds per minute, tungsten penetrators. It's designed to literally shred anything that gets within a mile or so. A final wall of metal.
And we shouldn't forget the underwater dimension again. U.S. subs are part of this shield too.
Absolutely. A Virginia-class attack submarine is often part of the CSG. Highly stealthy, lethal hunters themselves. Their job is to find and neutralize any enemy submarines trying to sneak in. Their presence alone is a huge deterrent.
Okay, we got the offense, the defense. Let's play this out. That chilling scenario. 2 a.m., South China Sea. USS Ronald Reagan on patrol, say 150 miles off Taiwan. China decides to launch. What happens in those first few minutes?
Okay, so imagine simultaneous launches. Maybe a DF-21D from the mainland. An H-6 bomber lets loose a KD-21 from standoff range. And maybe Chinese surface ships fire a volley of YJ-18 cruise missiles closer in.
All at once. How much warning time does the Reagan have?
It's incredibly short. Detection by radar, especially for low-flying cruise missiles or fast re-entering ballistic missiles, you might be talking less than 5 seconds from initial detection to potential impact.
5 seconds. Wow. So on the ship, pandemonium.
Controlled chaos, hopefully. Alarms blare. General quarters, everyone races to battle stations. The Combat Information Center, the CIC, becomes the absolute nerve center. Screens lighting up, voices calling out tracks.
It Aegis kicks in automatically.
Instantly. It identifies the incoming threats, calculates trajectories, assigns weapons. You'd see missile hatches opening on the carrier's escort ships, the destroyers and cruisers.
What fires first?
Likely the SM-6s, trying to intercept the ballistic missiles and maybe the faster cruise missiles further out. You'd see those interceptors launch, streaking skyward.
And in this hypothetical, you mentioned a YJ-18 cruise missile gets through those outer layers. What happens then?
Right, so it avoids the SM-6s, maybe dodges an ESSM. Now it's getting close. That's when the Phalanx CIWS on the carrier or a nearby destroyer would spin up. That incredibly high rate of fire, trying to physically hit and destroy the missile just seconds before impact.
And let's say it doesn't. One missile hits near the flight deck, as the scenario suggests. What's the damage? Does the ship sink?
An impact like that would cause a huge explosion. Fireball, shrapnel, definitely damage to the flight deck, maybe aircraft parked there. Tragically, casualties among the crew are almost certain.
But the ship itself?
It's highly unlikely to sink from a single conventional missile hit like that. These supercarriers are enormous, heavily armored, compartmentalized. They are built to take damage and keep fighting. Think World War II carriers that survived multiple bomb and kamikaze hits.
So it's damaged, potentially badly, but still afloat and potentially operational.
Exactly. The fight isn't over after the first hit, not by a long shot. The immediate focus shifts to damage control. Fire-fighting teams rushing to the scene, crews sealing compartments, treating the wounded.
And launching assets.
Absolutely. They'd likely launch unmanned drones first to get eyes on the damage from above, assess the situation, and look for the launch platforms. EA-18G Growlers, the electronic warfare jets, would likely scramble, too, to start jamming enemy radar, communications, trying to disrupt any follow-on attacks.
And the U.S. submarines in the area.
They'd be going offensive, moving towards suspected enemy positions, ready to engage any further threats, particularly enemy subs or ships.
It sounds like this initial strike, however devastating, is just the beginning.
Yeah.
What's the broader U.S. reaction likely to be? This isn't just about one ship.
No, absolutely not. An attack on a U.S. aircraft carrier is, well, it's almost unprecedented in the modern era. It crosses a major line. The response wouldn't be isolated to that strike group. It would be Pacific-wide, potentially global.
So bases across the region go on high alert immediately.
Instantly. U.S. bases in Japan, South Korea, Guam, Hawaii too, alert levels skyrocket. Allies, Japan, Australia, South Korea, they'd be briefed immediately. Their own forces would start moving.
You mentioned bombers.
Yes, B-1s, maybe B-52s or B-2s, based in places like Guam or even the continental U.S., would likely become airborne relatively quickly, moving to holding positions. Satellites would be retasked, focusing intensely on China, looking for launch sites, command centers, troop movements.
And there's that huge question mark, isn't there? Was this it? A single strike? A warning? Or the start of something much bigger?
That uncertainty would be paralyzing almost. But hitting a carrier, it's such a significant act. The U.S. Navy would almost certainly shift to a full wartime posture immediately, assuming the worst until proven otherwise.
So what about the carrier strike group itself, assuming it's still fighting? What are its next moves after surviving the initial hit?
Survival and maintaining combat power. Strict radio silence, probably. All communications go encrypted. Air defense systems stay at maximum alert. Launching more aircraft, the E-2D Hawkeyes, for early warning, trying to see further out, detect anything else coming.
And the fighter jets. The Super Hornets, the F-35s.
They'd be scrambling. First, reconnaissance assess their own ship's damage, look for nearby threats. Then potentially strike missions, trying to find and neutralize whatever launched those missiles, be it ships, aircraft, or even coordinating targeting data for land-based launchers.
So retaliation isn't just a possibility, it's pretty much guaranteed.
I think you'd have to assume so. The question is what kind of retaliation, and how quickly.
What targets might the U.S. consider?
Strategically, they'd want to degrade China's ability to continue the fight. So, radar installations are key targets, especially those on the artificial islands China has built in the South China Sea, the Spratlys, the Paracels, mobile missile launchers, command and control nodes, maybe satellite communication links. They'd likely use standoff weapons like Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from destroyers and submarines like the USS Halsey, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, often part of these groups. Precision strikes to minimize escalation perhaps, but definitely strikes.
And cyber would play a role in the U.S. response, too.
Oh, undoubtedly. U.S. Cyber Command would be fully engaged, trying to disrupt Chinese military networks, maybe spoofing their GPS, degrading their command and control, making it harder for them to coordinate further attacks or defenses.
And those U.S. subs, the Virginia class?
Yeah.
They're not just defending anymore?
No, they become hunters. They'd be actively tracking Chinese ships and submarines. If another Chinese vessel posed an immediate threat, especially to the damaged carrier, the U.S. sub-commander might have the authority to engage. They likely already have a good idea where many Chinese assets are positioned.
And this response involves more than just the Navy, right? The whole military structure, allies.
Absolutely. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, PACOM, goes to its highest alert. Strategic bombers at Andersen Air Force Base on Guam are ready to go. Japan would almost certainly activate its own missile defenses, maybe put its Air Force and Navy on a war footing. Bases in Okinawa would become critical hubs. Australia would likely ready its ships and aircraft, increase surveillance. It becomes a coalition effort very quickly.
It really hammers home that this isn't just U.S. versus China. The whole region gets pulled in instantly.
The entire Indo-Pacific is immediately on edge. Japan is front and center treaty ally hosting U.S. bases, geographically close. They'd likely deploy Patriot missiles, move their Aegis destroyers, scramble fighters. It's an existential issue for them.
South Korea, too. They've got North Korea to worry about, but this.
They'd have to react. Higher alert status, coordinating closely with the U.S. The tension in the South China Sea would absolutely factor into their defense posture, even with the focus on Pyongyang.
And Australia. Down south, but a key player.
Key player, absolutely. Locking down their naval forces, readying RAAF aircraft, stepping up intelligence gathering. The AU-AU Security Pact means they're deeply tied in with the U.S. response.
And Taiwan. Caught right in the middle.
Taiwan becomes potential ground zero, doesn't it? They'd almost certainly go to full military readiness, mobilize reserves, and likely issue urgent calls for international support. The world's attention snaps right there.
What about the Philippines? They've been strengthening ties with the U.S. again.
Yeah, that's significant. Those bases the U.S. recently regained access to could become crucial staging points. Expect direct military coordination, maybe joint patrols, possibly even Philippine air assets providing some local cover under U.S. direction.
This could even ripple out to NATO? It's happening way over in the Pacific.
It's complex. Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause, probably wouldn't apply directly unless maybe NATO personnel were on the U.S. ship or directly involved somehow. But politically, huge pressure. Expect intense intelligence sharing, probably some European naval assets moving as a show of solidarity, and massive diplomatic pressure on Beijing from all NATO capitals.
Beyond the military and political, the global economy. What happens?
Oh, chaos. Immediate chaos. Trillions of dollars of trade flow through the South China Sea. Any major conflict there. Oil prices would spike instantly. Stock markets worldwide would likely plummet. Supply chains, already fragile, could snap. You could see panic buying, major economic disruption. It would be a global shockwave.
Which brings us to the terrifying endgame, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Does this start World War III? A full-blown war between the U.S. and China?
That is the abyss everyone is staring into in this scenario. It escalates beyond ships and missiles into this incredibly dangerous game of chicken. Who blinks first?
And neither side wants to be seen blinking, right? Appearing weak is politically disastrous.
Exactly. China might frame it as defensive within their sphere. The U.S. has global credibility, alliances on the line. The pressure to respond forcefully, to not back down, would be immense on both sides.
So you could see tit-for-tat escalation, more U.S. strikes, China maybe shooting back at U.S. planes or ships.
That's the terrifying spiral. Each action demands a reaction. Losses mount on both sides. Political rhetoric hardens. Military preparations accelerate. And the conflict could easily spill over. Taiwan, the Philippines, those disputed Senkaku Diaoyu Islands with Japan, they all become potential flashpoints.
Drawing in other countries more directly.
Potentially drawing in Japan, Australia, South Korea, maybe even India down the line. And then you have the unthinkable.
The nuclear aspect.
The nuclear aspect. If China felt cornered, felt it was losing conventionally, what desperate measures might they consider? Massive cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure, blinding U.S. satellites, or, God forbid, some kind of nuclear signaling, a demonstration, a threat.
Both sides are nuclear powers with second-strike capability.
Which means nuclear war is mutual destruction. But in the heat of a crisis, with miscalculation possible, it's the ultimate nightmare. Hotlines exist, back channels exist, but are they enough when missiles are flying and people are dying?
That fragility.
Yeah.
One wrong move, one ship too many sunk, one misinterpreted signal.
And you're over the edge. Look, this isn't science fiction. This is a scenario rooted in current tensions, real capabilities, and plausible strategic calculations. It's deeply, deeply concerning.
And the reality is, the South China Sea sees close calls, near misses between U.S. and Chinese forces quite frequently.
Yeah.
Constant reminders of just how tense things are.
Yeah.
So it leaves us, and leaves everyone listening, with a really stark question, doesn't it? Given how quickly and catastrophically things could escalate after an event like the one we've discussed, are the safeguards strong enough? Are both sides truly prepared or even able to prevent the slide into conflict? Or are we just drifting towards a future far more dangerous than we realize?
It's the question that keeps strategists up at night. And honestly, there's no easy answer. It requires constant vigilance, clear communication, and maybe ultimately a degree of luck we can't count on.
A sobering thought to end on. The stakes couldn't be higher.